Deep in the heart of the forest, the golden rule of survival echoes through the trees, reminding us that knowledge is the ultimate weapon in this unforgiving wilderness. And just like a blade slicing through timber, that power can be used to conquer your foes, or, if you're not careful, it can be the very thing that ruins you. Which is exactly the kind of cynical trap Zack finds himself in, forced to play the role of the group's handyman just because he mentioned a single childhood camping trip. So he tosses aside the useless, soggy firewood, fully aware that he's been pigeonholed into the role of the designated lumberjack for this entire miserable excursion. And honestly, he's not even sure why he's bothering, since his dad probably just bought the wood from a store anyway, but at least the solitude of the woods offers a sweet escape. Because let's be real, being the outsider in a group with years of shared history is a special kind of awkward that makes him want to just disappear into the trees. Meanwhile, back at the campsite, Tyler is having a total meltdown over the tent setup, proving he's the high-strung mess we all knew he was. While David and Izzy try to play the role of the chill mediators, offering brownies to calm the storm, but Tyler is clearly too far gone to be saved by snacks. And as the sun starts to dip, the tension in the camp is reaching a breaking point because Tyler is convinced that arriving late is a death sentence for their plans. But Hannah, ever the optimist, just smiles through the chaos, completely oblivious to the friction as she volunteers Zack to fix the mess and save the day. Zack wipes the sweat from his brow, masking his growing irritation with a forced, polite compliance that barely hides his desire to be anywhere else. While Hannah watches on, seemingly oblivious to the friction as she casually drops the detail about his family camping trips, effectively painting a target on his back. And Tyler, ever the opportunist, immediately pounces on the chance to delegate his own responsibilities, sneering the nickname Hatchetman like it's some kind of insult. So the two men lock eyes in a silent, heavy standoff, where the air grows thick with unspoken hostility, and the weight of the axe becomes a symbol of their divide. But Zack just offers a cold, sharp smile, accepting the burden with a flick of his wrist that leaves Tyler looking more unsettled than satisfied. And as Zack turns his back to walk away, Tyler is left stewing in his own bitter silence, clearly realizing he's lost the upper hand in this psychological game. While back at the edge of the clearing, Tyler vents his frustration to Hannah, labeling Zack as way too intense for their little social circle. Yet Hannah just laughs it off with a dismissive shrug, brushing aside the warning because she's already accepted this side of her boyfriend as just another part of his charm. Meanwhile, deep in the quiet of the woods, Zack kneels to gather his final haul, his mind already drifting toward the inevitable return to the campsite. And with a casual, practiced toss, he discards the excess wood, deciding that one night of fire is more than enough to deal with this group's nonsense. Suddenly, the very ground beneath Zack's boots begins to crackle with a violent, unnatural violet energy that defies every law of physics he's ever known. And his eyes widen in pure, unadulterated shock as the reality of his quiet woods is violently ripped away, replaced by a terrifying cosmic void, where he finds himself suspended in a swirling abyss of dark matter, surrounded by glowing, ominous rings that seem to be charting a path for his destruction. And he can only scream out in confusion, his mind racing to find a logical explanation for why the sky has turned into a digital nightmare. Because before he can even process the panic, a sharp, mechanical chime cuts through the silence, manifesting a glowing blue interface that demands his immediate attention. And as he stares at the text, the cold, clinical words confirm his worst fears, that the world he knows is being forcibly rewritten by some unseen, superior intelligence. While his brain desperately tries to cope with the absurdity of the situation, wondering if he's finally snapped or if he's just suffering from a massive, reality-bending heatstroke. But the system doesn't care about his sanity, coldly detailing how Earth is being merged with other planets and its wildlife is being upgraded to lethal levels. And just as he tries to wrap his head around the threat of alien worlds and mutated beasts, the interface forces a permanent, terrifying link to his very soul, leaving him to desperately wonder if he's witnessing the end of the world or if he just ate something way too strong back at the campsite. Zack drifts in the absolute nothingness of the void, his voice cracking as he desperately calls out for Hannah and David, praying for any sign of his old life. But the only response is a cold, digital pulse that signals the arrival of something truly monstrous, a herald of the system's cruel and calculated design. And the system doesn't even bother with pleasantries, flashing a red warning that the space is already occupied by a predator that shouldn't exist in his reality, forcing Zack to confront the terrifying reality of a survival role, his eyes wide with the realization that his life is now just a number in a game. And as the pressure mounts, he can only hiss in disbelief, his mind struggling to comprehend what kind of nightmare he's been dragged into. Because suddenly, the void erupts with a crimson canine horror, the beast Urkhas manifesting with a predatory hunger that makes the air itself feel heavy and lethal. And Zack stares up at the towering, red-skinned monster, his instincts screaming at him to run even though there is nowhere left to go in this abyss. While the system coldly lays out the math of his execution, highlighting a power gap so massive it's practically a death sentence written in glowing blue text. And Zack stares at the impossible numbers, his face hardening as he realizes the sheer, rigged disparity between his 100 and the beast's 100,000. So he grits his teeth, his frustration boiling over into a silent, defiant rage as he stares down the barrel of a game designed for him to lose. Zack stands his ground against the towering, crimson-skinned Urkhaz, his voice trembling as he screams that the sheer disparity in their power levels is completely insane. And before he can even process his own defiance, the system coldly registers his command, locking him into the lethal protocol SL34572 with a final digital finality. While the blue interface begins to spin with a nauseating hum, the numbers blurring into a chaotic blur that mocks his desperate, last-minute attempt to back out. And Zack lunges forward, his fist striking the intangible barrier of the system as he begs for the madness to stop, his knuckles bruising against the cold, unyielding light. But the digital slots continue to whirl with a mechanical, mocking rhythm, ignoring his frantic pleas as if he were nothing more than a glitch in their grand design. And suddenly, the spinning stops with a sharp, piercing chime that echoes through the void, revealing a 96 that hangs in the air like a taunting, cruel joke. While Zack stares at the glowing digits, his face pale and slick with sweat as he realizes that even a near-perfect roll might not be enough to save his life. And the system immediately pivots to the Herald, initiating a roll that cascades with impossible speed, the numbers climbing far beyond anything Zack could ever hope to achieve. As Urkhaz looms over him, a massive, predatory shadow that makes the odds feel like a crushing weight, leaving Zack to accept that no amount of luck can bridge this gap. And in his final moments of clarity, his mind drifts back to a simpler time, mourning the father he never got to say goodbye to before this nightmare began. Zack is haunted by a crushing wave of regret, his mind flashing back to a moment where he was too distracted by a game to be the brother Mackenzie deserved. And the weight of that memory hits him harder than the void itself, leaving him to wonder if anyone back at the campsite has even realized he's vanished. But there's no time for self-reflection because the monstrous Urkhaz is looming over him, a crimson nightmare ready to erase his existence from the fabric of reality. And the system interface continues its relentless mechanical whirring, the digital slots spinning with a cold indifference that feels like a countdown to his inevitable, gruesome end. Yet Zack refuses to go down without a fight, his hand tightening around his makeshift weapon as he decides that he isn't going to roll over and die for this. Because he's done playing by the rules of a rigged game, staring into the abyss with a burning intensity that defies the impossible odds stacked against him. And with a desperate primal roar of defiance, he demands a single chance to survive, his amber eyes glowing with a ferocity that catches the system off guard. While the digital slots finally slam to a halt, revealing a 91 for the Herald and triggering a congratulatory chime that signals a shift in the cosmic balance. And Zack stands frozen in the void, his heart hammering against his ribs as he realizes the impossible has happened and he has actually managed to win the round. While the beast Urkhaz lets out a deafening, frustrated roar, its crimson form thrashing as the system confirms the Herald is locked out of any further rerolls. The monstrous Urkhaz lets out a final, earth-shattering howl as the red energy binding it begins to fracture and dissolve into nothingness. While Zack stands amidst the chaos, his body surging with a newfound, crackling power that hums with the intensity of a dying star. And he lets out a guttural, primal scream as the raw energy of the system forcibly rewrites his physical limits, pushing him past the threshold of a normal human. Because the interface finally flashes with the cold, definitive verdict that the trial is over, and the threat of the Herald has been completely erased from existence. And the system doesn't waste a single millisecond, immediately initiating a rapid-fire sequence of upgrades that flood Zack's senses with the overwhelming sensation of a total level up, leaving him to collapse onto the forest floor, his body exhausted and trembling as the adrenaline of the fight finally begins to bleed out of his system. And he gasps for air, his mind reeling as he tries to piece together the fragments of the nightmare he just barely managed to survive. While he clutches his chest, checking for injuries and wondering if he's still in the same woods or if he's been dumped into some other hellish dimension. And as he pushes himself up, he looks around at the bioluminescent trees and glowing flora, realizing with a sinking heart that he is definitely not in Kansas anymore. Because the system delivers the final, soul-crushing blow, announcing that Earth is being merged with other planets to facilitate a much larger, much deadlier initiation. Zack stands frozen in the clearing, his hand raking through his hair as he desperately tries to rationalize the impossible, wondering if his mind is finally fracturing under the strain. And he scans the perimeter with a frantic intensity, his eyes darting across the familiar trees as he questions whether he even knows where he is anymore. But then his gaze locks onto a specific point in the distance, his pupils dilating as the horrifying truth of his situation begins to crystallize in his mind. Because he realizes with a jolt of pure adrenaline that he hasn't wandered nearly as far as he thought, yet the campsite ahead looks like a scene from a nightmare. And he notes the fire still crackling with an eerie, lonely persistence, mocking him with the realization that his friends are nowhere to be found. So he calls out into the oppressive silence, his voice cracking as he demands to know what happened to the group while he was away. But the only answer is a sickening, wet crunching sound that echoes from the direction of the camp, freezing the blood in his veins instantly. And as he creeps closer, the sight of the discarded supplies and the unnatural stillness of the woods forces him to confront the grim reality of a predator's presence. Because there, hunched over the remains of their supplies, is the monstrous Urkhaz, its purple hide rippling with muscle as it tears into the remnants of their peace. And as the beast turns its glowing red eyes toward him, Zack realizes he has walked straight into the jaws of a lethal, otherworldly trap. Zack swings his fire axe with a desperate, lethal precision, carving a deep, violet-stained arc through the air as he narrowly avoids the beast's razor-sharp claws. And the sheer force of his strike sends a shockwave rippling through the clearing, leaving him breathless as he realizes his own strength has reached terrifying new heights. But the system doesn't give him a moment to celebrate, flashing that familiar, ominous blue interface that reminds him exactly where he is and what he's up against. Yet he barely has time to process the digital prompt before the monstrous Urkhaz lunges again, its glowing red eyes locked onto him with a hunger that defies logic. And as the system initiates a high-stakes dice roll, the numbers blur into a frantic, spinning vortex that threatens to decide his fate in a single, cold heartbeat. While Zack clutches his wounded shoulder, the pain grounding him in the brutal reality that this is no longer a dream, but a fight for his very soul. And he screams into the void for his friends, his voice swallowed by the oppressive, unnatural silence of the forest as he realizes he is completely alone. But the beast is relentless, closing the distance with a thunderous stomp that shakes the earth, forcing Zack to scramble for cover behind the wreckage of their campsite. And as the creature surges forward with a blur of purple muscle and lethal intent, Zack realizes with a sinking gut that his speed is barely enough to keep him alive. So he prepares for one final, desperate counterattack, bracing himself as the beast leaps into the air, ready to crush him beneath the weight of its monstrous predatory power. Zack tracks the beast's movements with a predator's eye, realizing that while Urkhaz possesses terrifying speed, its massive, hulking frame makes it incapable of executing sharp, tight turns. And that single tactical epiphany shifts his entire mindset, turning his paralyzing fear into a cold, calculated focus as he realizes he finally has a winning edge. So he watches the creature commit to a full-throttle dash, its powerful muscles coiling as it launches itself forward, completely unable to adjust its trajectory once it commits. And Zack seizes the opening, his instincts screaming for him to bait the monster into a collision course that will leave it vulnerable to his next strike. While the beast thunders across the clearing in a blur of purple muscle and bone, its momentum carrying it straight into the trap Zack has laid out. And he presses his blood-slicked hand against the cold, hard surface of the wreckage, steadying his breathing as he prepares to unleash everything he has left. While he stands his ground amidst the ruins of the campsite, his posture radiating a dangerous, newfound confidence that defies the horrific injuries he has sustained. And as his hand trembles against the handle of his fire axe, he briefly questions if the shaking is a sign of cowardice or the sheer, raw terror of mortality. But he quickly dismisses the doubt, realizing the vibration in his veins isn't fear at all, but a burning, unadulterated rage that demands the beast's total destruction. So he lets out a final, deafening roar of pure defiance, challenging the monster to finish the fight and daring death itself to come and take him. The beast Urkhaz lunges with a terrifying, violet-charged ferocity, its massive form eclipsing the light as it prepares to tear through anything in its path. But Zack, fueled by the raw, adrenaline-soaked clarity of a survivor, executes a perfect split-second dodge that leaves the monster clawing at empty, shimmering air. And the momentum of the beast's failed strike carries it straight into the unforgiving stone, the impact creating a shockwave that rattles the very foundation of the forest. While Zack wastes no time, his grip tightening on the blood-slicked handle of his axe as he prepares to deliver the final, decisive blow to his tormentor. And with a guttural, primal roar, he drives the blade deep into the creature's exposed hide, the sound of tearing flesh echoing like a death knell through the trees. As he unleashes a flurry of savage, desperate slashes, his mind screaming that he has already survived worse odds than this pathetic, oversized hound. And he rains down a final, crushing strike that shatters the beast's defenses, his amber eyes burning with a cold, lethal intensity that declares the monster absolutely worthless. While the system finally acknowledges his dominance, flooding his vision with a triumphant, glowing blue notification that confirms he has earned his 100 Nexus coins. And as the light fades from the creature's eyes, Zack collapses against the wreckage, his chest heaving as the heavy, suffocating weight of the battle finally begins to lift. But the silence of the woods is still deafening, and with his last reserves of strength, he drags his broken body toward the trailer, desperate to find any sign of his missing friends. Zack collapses against the cold metal of the trailer, his body battered and stained with the crimson evidence of his brutal life-or-death struggle. And he drags himself across the threshold, every movement a testament to the sheer, agonizing toll this hellish trial has taken on his physical form. While the world outside shifts into a surreal, cosmic twilight, a haunting reminder that the familiar forest he once knew has been swallowed by something far more sinister. And he stares into the distance with hollow, amber eyes, his mind struggling to reconcile the man he was just days ago with the hardened survivor he has become. But the throbbing in his skull forces him to focus, his hand rising to soothe the ache as he tries to piece together the fractured timeline of his survival. And he examines his own blood-caked hand, the sight sparking a grim realization that the violence he just unleashed is only the beginning of his new lethal reality. While he checks his phone with a trembling hand, the digital display mocking him with the date, confirming the impossible truth that 3 full days have vanished into the void. And his eyes widen in a flash of pure, cold clarity, the weight of the time dilation hitting him like a physical blow as he processes the terrifying gap in his memory. Because he scans the abandoned, cluttered interior of the trailer, the silent screaming that Hannah, Tyler, David, and Izzy are truly gone, leaving their lives behind like forgotten ghosts. And he tightens the bandage around his arm with his teeth, his expression hardening into a mask of pragmatic resolve as he finally accepts that he is completely, utterly alone. Zack stands amidst the eerie, glowing foliage, his mind reeling as he questions the sanity of a world that has suddenly turned into a lethal alien playground. And he stares at his own hand, stunned to find that the wounds from his brutal encounter have vanished, replaced by skin that shows no sign of the carnage. While he struggles to catch his breath, his amber eyes wide with the terrifying realization that he should be dead, yet he is standing here stronger than ever. And he surveys the ruins of his isolation, noting the useless phone and the dead car battery that serve as grim reminders of his total disconnection from humanity. While he grips his axe with white-knuckled intensity, his gaze hardening as he recalls the monstrous, purple-skinned predator that nearly claimed his life in the void. And he wonders if the entire planet is suffering through this cosmic nightmare, or if he is the only one trapped in this twisted, survivalist experiment. While his thoughts drift to the faces of his father and little Kenzie, the memories acting as a painful anchor that keeps him from spiraling into total despair. And he stares into the distance with a newfound, icy resolve, his amber eyes burning with the singular, desperate mission to find his way back to his family. Because he knows that sitting around waiting for a rescue that will never come is a death sentence, so he prepares to push forward into the unknown. And with a final, decisive leap, he vaults into the dense, overgrown canopy, ready to hunt the truth behind this world-ending catastrophe. Zack gasps as the reality of his situation settles in, his chest heaving with the weight of a world that has been irrevocably shattered. And he stares out at the horizon where a massive, glowing pillar of light pierces the sky, marking a landscape that is no longer the home he once knew. While his eyes widen at the sight of an endless, shimmering ocean that shouldn't exist, forcing him to wonder if he is trapped on some isolated cosmic island. And he grits his teeth in pure, unadulterated frustration, cursing the unseen forces that have turned his peaceful camping trip into a living, breathing nightmare. As he screams his defiance into the dense, overgrown forest, his voice echoing with the rage of a man who refuses to be a pawn in a game he never signed up for. But the system ignores his anger, bombarding his vision with a cascade of glowing blue notifications that detail his rapid, violent ascension through the ranks of this new reality. And he watches in disbelief as a flurry of titles like Ultimate Reaper and Slayer of Leviathans flash before him, each one a grim reminder of the blood he has already spilled. While he stands frozen in the clearing, his mind reeling as the interface continues to chime with the cold, clinical efficiency of a machine that views his survival as a mere statistic. And he stares at the glowing text with a mix of horror and fascination, struggling to comprehend how he has been transformed into something far more lethal than the man he was. Until finally, the full, terrifying scope of his status screen manifests, revealing a level 16 survivor whose very existence is now defined by the brutal, unforgiving logic of the system. Zack stares into the digital void, his mind struggling to process the sheer insanity of a reality that has officially glitched into a high-stakes video game. And he pulls up his status screen with a trembling finger, his eyes widening as he realizes his rapid climb to level 16 is tied directly to that chaotic, life-saving dice roll. While he meticulously scans the glowing blue text, the cold realization hitting him that his strength isn't just natural, it's a byproduct of the titles he's been forced to earn. And he stares at the list of active quests, his heart sinking as he reads the brutal requirements for survival, knowing he's now locked into a 3-month death match. While his gaze drifts toward the horizon, where a piercing red beam of light tears through the sky, confirming that the incursion is real and far more dangerous than he imagined. And he questions the very nature of an outpost, wondering if this mysterious base is the only thing standing between him and total annihilation in this monster-infested hellscape. While he contemplates the safety of a permanent home, realizing that even a fortified base would be a massive upgrade over his current, precarious existence in the wild. And he finally relents to the system's prompt, his frustration giving way to a grim, pragmatic acceptance as he commands the interface to materialize his new sanctuary. While he perches high in the canopy, axe in hand, only to be interrupted by a strange, humming sound that draws his attention to a floating, nebuloid observer. And he whirls around, his amber eyes burning with a mix of shock and lethal intent, as he demands to know exactly what this mysterious entity is. Zack stumbles over the uneven terrain, his boots catching on a fallen log as the chilling realization hits him that the creature before him is absolutely not human. And the floating system observer drifts closer, its nebula-filled core pulsing with a cold, mocking light as it admits that they are both equally disappointed in this outcome. While Zack lunges with his axe, his body moving with a frantic, desperate energy as he tries to regain his footing against the encroaching, scaled horror. And his hand shoots out, fingers digging into the slick, purple hide of the forest serpent as he attempts to gain a grip on the massive, constricting coils. As he struggles to maintain his balance, his muscles straining against the immense weight of the beast that threatens to crush the life right out of him. And he grinds his teeth in agony, the realization dawning on him that he let his guard down for one single, fatal second in this lethal wilderness. While the serpent's fangs glint with a predatory hunger, its massive body coiling tighter and tighter as it prepares to finish the fight once and for all. And Zack stares into the creature's glowing yellow eyes, his mind racing as he reminds himself that this is no game and he cannot afford to falter. As the serpent's grip tightens around his chest, Zack finds a spark of grim determination, knowing that if he wants to survive and grow stronger, he must take risks. And he slams his hand against the beast's head, his knuckles white with the intensity of a man who refuses to be consumed by the monsters of this world. Zack roars with a primal, bone-deep defiance, his hand slamming into the serpent's skull with such explosive force that the very air seems to shatter around them. And the impact is so violent it sends a shockwave through the trunk of the massive tree, the wood splintering under the sheer pressure of his desperate, lethal strike. While he is flung backward, his body contorting in midair as he fights to maintain his grip, his face twisted into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. Because he knows the cold, hard truth of this new reality is that the system only has eyes for the killers, the ones who refuse to be prey. And he clings to that singular, burning thought, letting it fuel his muscles as he realizes that in this world, power is the only currency that keeps you breathing. While he stares down the barrel of his own mortality, his amber eyes hardening with the grim vow that he will claw his way to the top no matter the cost. And the system observer watches from above, its nebula-filled eye pulsing with a mix of detached amusement and genuine shock at the boy's refusal to simply lay down and die. While the entity floats in the canopy, still reeling from the audacity of a human who would dare to build an outpost in a tree, mocking the choice as the height of stupidity. But the mocking silence is suddenly broken by a rhythmic, wet, and violent sound echoing from below, a sound that forces the observer to pause and look down in confusion. And there, hidden by the dense foliage, Zack continues his relentless, blood-soaked assault, his axe biting into the serpent with a savage persistence that leaves the observer absolutely speechless. The floating construct pulses with a sudden, sharp intensity, its nebula-filled core swirling as it processes the sheer, chaotic brutality of the scene unfolding below. And as the dust settles, the carnage of the forest serpent lies scattered across the clearing, a testament to the raw, unbridled power Zack has just unleashed. While he stands amidst the gore, his axe still gripped tightly in his blood-stained hand, his chest heaving with the adrenaline of a man who refuses to be broken. And the entity known as Abby drifts closer, its glowing eye narrowing as it reevaluates the human who has managed to survive against all logical expectations. Finally dropping the facade of indifference to admit that its initial assessment of his potential was, quite frankly, a massive, cosmic miscalculation. And it introduces itself as Vethabarak, though it offers the nickname Abby, floating with a strange, ethereal grace that contrasts sharply with the violence of the forest. While Zack, still reeling from the fight, demands to know how this thing can speak without a mouth and what exactly it means by assisting him. But Abby just sighs with a digital, condescending edge, lamenting the fact that she's been saddled with another rube who skipped the mandatory system tutorial. And as Zack snaps back with a desperate, frustrated retort about being left to rot in this demon forest for 3 days, the entity blinks in genuine surprise. Because the revelation that only 3 days have passed hits them both like a shockwave, shattering Zack's perception of time and leaving him to grapple with the terrifying truth. Abby drifts in the air, her nebula-filled core pulsing with a rhythmic, hypnotic light as she begins to unravel the cosmic mystery that has ensnared Zack. And Zack stands amidst the wreckage of his campsite, his hand gripping his axe as he demands to know the meaning behind the cryptic label of Defier. While Abby explains that the universe is a vast, ancient expanse of countless worlds, a reality that has existed for billions of years before Earth was ever integrated. And she gestures toward the swirling, stardusted void, revealing that the cosmos is a playground of infinite scale, far beyond the comprehension of any mortal mind. As she notes that most of his world's population has been whisked away to protected tutorial towns, leaving them in a temporary, fragile state of safety. But Zack's heart sinks as he realizes the brutal truth, that those who cannot naturally absorb cosmic energy are essentially marked for a swift and violent end. And he watches as the system displays a horrific vision of mortals being torn apart by predators, their lives snuffed out like candles in a hurricane. While he stands alone in the clearing, the weight of his own survival pressing down on him as he wonders if his fate is already sealed. And he stares into the distance with eyes burning with a desperate, lethal intensity, questioning if he is truly destined to join the ranks of the fallen. But Abby offers a chilling, ambiguous answer, hinting that a defier is a rare anomaly who defies the very laws of the system to claim power beyond all expectations. Abby's voice echoes with a cold, cosmic authority as she reminds Zack that the system views him as nothing more than a disposable variable. But even as she speaks, the sheer, raw defiance radiating from his amber eyes proves that he is far from the weakling the system expects. And he stands his ground, his knuckles white as he grips his axe, refusing to let the weight of this impossible situation crush his spirit. While Abby continues to loom over him, her nebula-filled core swirling with an ancient, detached power that makes the entire forest feel like a tiny, insignificant cage. And she warns him with a chilling, absolute certainty that the system has zero tolerance for cowards, making it clear that his only path forward is through blood. As she clenches a massive, spectral fist of starlight in the air, a visual threat that underscores the brutal, unforgiving consequences of failing his mandatory trials. And Zack stares back, his jaw set in a line of grim, pragmatic resolve as he questions the lack of choice in this nightmare. While Abby maintains her cold, clinical pressure, reminding him that he is at the very forefront of this cosmic experiment and that every move is being recorded. And she drops the final, soul-crushing demand that he accelerate his progress, insisting he finish 3 months of lethal objectives in a single, grueling month. But before he can even process the insanity of that timeline, a sudden, violent surge of energy erupts, leaving the air crackling with the sound of a reality-bending crunch. Zack stands in the heart of the woods, axe gripped tight as a sudden, violent flash of violet energy tears through the air, leaving him shouting into the void. And before he can even process the sudden disappearance of his guide, a cold, glowing blue interface manifests in the air, delivering a message that chills him to the bone. Because the system has decided to pull the plug on his guidance, leaving him to stare at the empty space where his mentor once stood, his mind reeling in pure disbelief. And as the reality of his isolation sets in, he realizes that the system's demands have only grown more suffocating, forcing him to confront the impossible timeline of a single month. While miles away in a completely different reality, the demon noble Agras stands on a balcony overlooking a lavish, opulent banquet hall filled with the elite of his clan. And he leans against the railing, his glowing blue eyes burning with a deep-seated, simmering resentment as he nurses a glass of wine, clearly disgusted by the hollow pageantry below. When a woman in a striking red dress approaches him, her voice dripping with a mix of mockery and calculated charm as she points out his obvious lack of joy. And she attempts to force a smile out of him, insisting that the night is meant for celebration, though Agras remains unmoved, his bitterness only deepening at her hollow words. Because she drops the bombshell that his grandfather, the patriarch Akril, has officially appointed him as the new incursion general, a title that carries the weight of 1,000 expectations. And Agras stares back at her with a look of pure, unadulterated loathing, knowing full well that this so-called honor is nothing more than a gilded cage he is forced to inhabit. Agras stands in the shadows of the banquet hall, his expression a mask of cold, aristocratic detachment as he observes the chaos unfolding before him. While Aaliyah continues her relentless verbal assault, goading him to abandon his hedonistic lifestyle and embrace the brutal, bloody reality of their clan's military ambitions. But Agras remains unmoved by her taunts, his mind already drifting toward the grander, more sinister schemes he is orchestrating behind the scenes of this pathetic display. And suddenly, the air in the hall turns frigid as a blonde demon noble collapses, his body convulsing with an unnatural, violet energy that defies all explanation. While the crowd erupts into a frenzy of panic and confusion, the banquet hall descending into a scene of absolute, unmitigated disaster as the noble hits the floor. And Aaliyah rushes to the fallen demon, her voice rising in a desperate, shrill demand for assistance that echoes through the now silent, terrified chamber. While Agras watches the scene from above, his eyes glowing with a dark, knowing light as he contemplates the fragility of these so-called powerful elites. And he turns his back on the carnage, his cape swirling around him as he prepares to vanish into the night, leaving them to choke on their own political games. Meanwhile, back in the wild, the forest stream babbles with a deceptive, tranquil beauty that hides the lethal, predatory threats lurking just beneath the surface. And a monstrous, purple-skinned beast emerges from the trees to drink, its glowing red eyes fixated on a fragile, glowing butterfly that lands upon its snout. The monstrous beast pauses in the tranquil woods, its predatory senses momentarily distracted by the delicate, glowing butterfly that lands upon its snout. But the brief moment of peace is shattered as Zack emerges from the shadows, his eyes burning with a lethal, focused intensity that signals the end of the creature's hunt. And with a sudden, violent motion, he drives his blade deep into the beast's spine, the force of the strike sending a spray of crimson across the forest floor. While the system immediately floods his vision with the glorious, glowing blue text of his hard-earned rewards, confirming his new title and the influx of precious Nexus coins. And Zack collapses onto the riverbank, his body trembling from the exertion as he stares at the lifeless carcass, finally allowing himself a moment of grim, exhausted relief. While he muses on the cold, unforgiving nature of the system, realizing that leveling up in this hellscape is a grueling, uphill battle that demands everything he has. And he pulls up his status screen, his eyes scanning the numbers that define his survival, noting the 32 free stat points that sit there like a lifeline. But he quickly dismisses the temptation to hoard his power for some distant, uncertain future, knowing that in a world this lethal, hesitation is just another word for death. So he begins to tap away at the interface with a frantic, pragmatic speed, dumping every single point into his physical attributes to ensure he stays ahead of the curve. And as the final stat is allocated, he stares at the screen with a hardened, unyielding resolve, fully accepting that he must live for the present because there might not be a tomorrow. Zack lies flat on his back, hands behind his head as he calculates the brutal countdown, realizing he has only 25 days left to hit his impossible target. And he turns the memory of Abby's cryptic advice over in his mind, wondering if the system's push for speed is a genuine opportunity or a trap. Because he knows there was a specific, calculated reason she urged him to finish his quests in a single month instead of the standard 3-month window. And he stares into the sky with a hardened gaze, convinced that the system's punishment of his guide was directly linked to that very piece of forbidden intel. While he contemplates the high-stakes gamble of his current path, realizing that either a massive reward awaits him or he is simply running toward his own end. And he finds himself kneeling by the water, cupping the cool liquid in his hands as he acknowledges the rare, fleeting window of opportunity he currently possesses. Because while the rest of the world remains trapped in the slow, agonizing crawl of the tutorial, he is actively carving out his own path to power. And he drinks deeply, his face set in a mask of grim determination as he vows that he will not let a single drop of this potential go to waste. While he rises to his feet, axe slung over his shoulder with a predatory grace that signals he is finished with rest and ready to hunt. And he turns his back on the campsite, the fire crackling in the lonely dark as he prepares to roast his kill and get back to work. Zack studies the glowing interface, realizing that his most prestigious titles are all defined by the brutal milestone of being the very first to achieve them. And the system confirms his status with a series of notifications, detailing the massive stat boosts granted by his Born for Carnage, Ultimate Reaper, and Slayer of Leviathan's titles. But he pauses mid-bite, the meat hanging from his skewer as he reflects on the fact that creating his own outpost yielded absolutely no such recognition. And he stares into the flickering campfire, the silence of the woods amplifying his suspicion that he is far from the only player in this deadly game. Because he knows that if a simple forest serpent could evolve into such a terrifying threat so quickly, then others must have already been pushing their limits long before him. And he contemplates the terrifying reality that there is no way to gauge the true strength of the other survivors who have been scattered across this hostile dimension. While he scans the shop interface with a desperate, hungry focus, determined to find any resource that can bridge the gap and help him reunite with his family. And he swipes through the endless catalog of items, noting that every single upgrade is locked behind the cold, transactional requirement of earning more Nexus coins. But his eyes lock onto a specific entry that makes his heart skip a beat, the word teleporter glowing with the promise of a way off this godforsaken island. And he grins with a feral, desperate intensity, realizing that even if he can't find his family immediately, he will do whatever it takes to escape this hell and return to civilization. The system drops a massive 10 million coin price tag on the teleporter, a weight that literally crushes Zack's chibified spirit into the dirt. And he stares at the screen with a look of pure, unadulterated disbelief, realizing that slaughtering demon dogs alone will never bridge that astronomical gap. But his mind begins to race, pivoting toward his active quests as he wonders if there's a shortcut hidden within the system's complex, bureaucratic reward structure. And he studies the list of objectives, noting that conquering the incursion and protecting his outpost could potentially grant him the unique buildings he desperately needs. So he resolves to push forward, accepting that this dangerous gamble is his only real chance to maintain his momentum and survive this hellish initiation. While he acknowledges that hoarding Nexus coins is a fool's errand, knowing he has to reinvest every scrap of currency into immediate, tangible power. And he recalls the two critical items he already secured, starting with the Eye of Discernment, a skill that allows him to peer into the nature of his enemies. As he activates the ability, feeling the cold, digital interface burn into his retina, granting him the tactical insight he needs to dismantle his foes with lethal efficiency. And he reflects on his second purchase, the F-grade Mother-Daughter Gathering Array, a necklace that siphons cosmic energy from the environment while he sleeps. Because even if he isn't a natural-born cultivator, he refuses to let that stop him from stealing their power, so he grabs his axe and heads back into the dark to hunt. Zack stands tall with his axe slung over his shoulder, his gaze hardened by the relentless, soul-crushing routine of a survivor who has dedicated every waking second to the hunt. And he recalls the tactical advantage of his high-ground ambushes, waiting patiently in the canopy to drop down on unsuspecting demon dogs before they even know he is there. Because when he manages to catch them off guard, the fights are over in a heartbeat, leaving the beasts shattered and broken against the unforgiving forest floor. But he knows all too well that when the element of surprise is lost, the situation turns into a desperate, teeth-gritting struggle for his very life. And he kneels in the mud to inspect fresh tracks, his fingers brushing the wet earth as he realizes that every single encounter is a brutal lesson in survival. Because he has been forced to master the art of the perfect axe swing, turning his weapon into an extension of his own lethal, growing willpower. And he has learned the hard way how to parry and block, turning the crushing blows of the demon hounds into mere clangs of steel against bone. While he activates his Eye of Discernment to dissect his prey, finally putting a name to the monsters that have been hounding his every step through this hell. And he meticulously maintains hidden supply caches tucked away in the hollows of ancient trees, ensuring he has a lifeline even when he is miles from his base. As he trudges back toward his camp with the heavy, blood-soaked carcass of his latest kill draped over his shoulders, proving that he is the one who truly owns this forest, Zack lunges forward with the lethal grace of a seasoned killer, his fire axe raised high to deliver a crushing blow against the monstrous Barghest. And the beast retaliates with a flurry of razor-sharp claws, drawing blood as it desperately tries to fend off the relentless onslaught of its former prey. While Zack reflects on the sheer volume of slaughter he has committed, noting that the count of dead monsters has climbed into the hundreds. And though the system has made his progression increasingly difficult, his own raw power has continued to swell, turning him into a force of nature. Until the dynamic of the forest has shifted entirely, with the once feared Barghest now reduced to nothing more than fodder for his insatiable growth. And as he hits level 23, the cold, blue light of the system reflects in his eyes, fueling his burning realization that he must accelerate his pace. While his status screen flashes before him, displaying the hard-earned stats that have turned him into a survivor, yet reminding him that time is rapidly running out. And miles away, the demon General Agras lounges in his opulent office, nursing a drink while the rhythmic sound of footsteps signals an unwelcome interruption. As his subordinate Rydell enters the room, his stern, armored presence cutting through the relaxed atmosphere of the office like a blade through silk. And Agras greets him with a mocking, tipsy smile, feigning interest in the incursion preparations, while Rydell stares back with thinly veiled, professional contempt. Agras lounges with a glass of wine, his sharp grin cutting through the dim light as he challenges his subordinate to stop acting so stiff. But Rydell remains standing, his posture rigid and his expression unyielding as he questions if his superior has been drinking on the job again. And Agras just groans, clearly annoyed by the constant scrutiny, while he reminds everyone that the incursion is still weeks away, leaving him with nothing to do. So Rydell plays along with a cold, professional grin, sliding a document across the desk that demands a signature to finalize a new appointment. And Agras glances at the paper, realizing it is the official request to name his cousin Kevoran as the new master of scouts. So he signs the order without a second thought, his lethargic attitude masking the deeper, darker schemes he is constantly turning over in his mind. While Rydell accepts the signed document with a bow, promising to see the orders carried out with the efficiency that Agras clearly lacks. And Agras dismisses him with a casual wave, taking another sip of his wine as he lets out a small, drunken hiccup in the quiet office. While he stares into the shadows with a predatory glint in his eyes, counting down the days until he can finally escape the suffocating politics of his clan. And far away in the dark, overgrown wilderness, Zack pushes aside the thick foliage, his bandaged hand reaching out as he stalks his next target through the trees. Zack crouches low in the dense brush, his eyes locked on a hulking, purple-skinned beast that sniffs the air with predatory intent. And he keeps his breathing shallow and steady, silently thanking the wind for keeping his scent hidden from the monster's keen, twitching nostrils. While he grips his axe with white-knuckled intensity, realizing that despite his growing strength, this creature is a different breed of nightmare entirely. And his heart skips a beat as the beast's head snaps toward his position, its glowing red eyes burning with a sudden, terrifying spark of recognition. Because in a blur of motion that defies the laws of nature, the monster lunges forward and tears into a smaller creature with a sickening, wet snap. And Zack recoils into the shadows, his chest heaving as he watches the carnage, the sheer brutality of the display leaving him breathless and trembling. While the monster continues its savage feast, its jaws working with a rhythmic, bone-crushing intensity that echoes through the silent, oppressive forest. And suddenly, the beast launches itself into the air, a massive, shadowy blur of muscle and malice that seems to be closing the distance in a heartbeat. So Zack scrambles backward, his mind racing as he processes the impossible speed of the creature and the chilling realization that he is staring at a herald. And he turns and bolts through the undergrowth, his legs burning as he tries to outrun a predator whose claws are the size of his own arm. Zack's face contorts with a desperate, razor-sharp focus as he realizes that surviving this nightmare requires more than just brute strength. It demands a cold, calculated plan. And he creeps through the underbrush, his boots making barely a sound as he stalks toward the flickering light of a campfire that shouldn't be here. While he freezes in his tracks, his amber eyes widening in disbelief as he hears the impossible, the guttural, chattering language of demons echoing through the night. And he presses his back against the rough bark of a tree, his heart hammering against his ribs as he peeks out to see a Gwilgi and an imp. While the imp pokes at a roasting carcass with a cruel, mocking gesture, its voice dripping with a sinister intelligence that makes Zack's skin crawl with dread. And he watches from the shadows, his mind racing as he wonders if these creatures are scouts sent to hunt him down and expose his hidden outpost. So he narrows his eyes and activates his eye of discernment, the blue targeting reticle locking onto the monsters as he prepares to rip the truth from their minds. While the system interface erupts in a cascade of glowing data, confirming that he is staring at an imp and a Gwilgi, both loyal soldiers of Clan Azrazak. But his blood turns to ice as the imp's head snaps toward his hiding spot, its multiple eyes glowing with the terrifying realization that it has sensed his power. And he barely has time to curse his luck before the imp shrieks, its hand igniting with a lethal, violet-charged blast of energy that screams toward his position. Zack swings his hatchet with everything he has, the air igniting in a violent, purple explosion of energy as he desperately deflects the imp's incoming projectile. And the Gwilgi seizes the opening, lunging at him with predatory speed, while its tail crackles with the same soul-scorching, violet flames that threaten to consume him. But Zack twists his body in midair, narrowly dodging the beast's razor-sharp claws as he fights to maintain his footing against the relentless, coordinated assault. And he hits the ground with a bone-jarring thud, his voice erupting in a raw, furious command for the demon to back off as he scrambles to regain his stance. While he frantically swats at the lingering purple embers clinging to his clothes, his face twisted in a grimace of confusion and mounting, white-hot pain. And he stares at his shoulder, the skin charred and pulsing with an unnatural, dark energy that confirms his worst fears about the lethality of these demonic attacks. While the imp cackles from the shadows, its multiple eyes gleaming with a sadistic, alien intelligence as it prepares to unleash another wave of soul-burning fire. And the Gwilgi snaps its jaws with a final, decisive crunch, shattering the head of Zack's hatchet into useless, jagged shards of metal. While Zack stands alone in the clearing, staring at the broken weapon in his hands as the reality of being outnumbered and outgunned crashes down upon him. But his amber eyes ignite with a terrifying, predatory hunger, his face contorting into a feral grin as he decides that if he is going to die, he will take them down with him. Zack drops into a low, predatory crouch, his muscles coiled like a spring as he prepares to launch himself at the Gwilgi. And the imp shrieks in the background, unleashing a torrent of soul-burning violet energy that tears through the air with a deafening, reality-warping boom. While Zack moves with a blur of desperate, adrenaline-fueled speed, his hands outstretched as he weaves through the magical onslaught. And the Gwilgi leaps forward, its massive, armored form a streak of crimson malice as it prepares to tear him apart. But Zack meets the beast head-on, his arms locking around its thick, muscular neck in a brutal, desperate grapple that defies the creature's overwhelming strength. And with a savage, ground-shaking slam, he drives the demon into the earth, the impact sending shockwaves through the forest floor. While he rains down a flurry of heavy, bone-crushing blows, his fists connecting with the beast's skull in a rhythmic, violent display of raw, physical dominance. And he delivers a final, thunderous strike that echoes with the sickening crunch of breaking bone, his amber eyes burning with the cold light of a survivor. While he stands over the broken, twitching remains of the Gwilgi, his chest heaving as he prepares to face the final, lingering threat of the imp. And suddenly, the air erupts in a blinding, violet explosion of soul-burning magic, forcing Zack to scream in agony as the energy threatens to consume his very essence. Zack screams as the violet flames of the imp's magic sear through his very soul, the agonizing heat threatening to unravel his consciousness entirely. And in the depths of his mind, the system's cold, mechanical voice echoes, mocking his struggle as it calculates the probability of his imminent, pathetic demise. But even as the fire consumes him, he refuses to let go, his body twitching with a residual, desperate energy that defies the system's cruel, calculated logic. And he stares into the cosmic void, his mind flooded with the terrifying, beautiful truth of the universe's fundamental, chaotic building blocks. While the revelation of what truly sustains the multiverse washes over him, a blinding, stardusted epiphany that burns away his fear and replaces it with cold, hard resolve. And he realizes that the power he has been chasing was never just a tool, but a part of his own existence that he had been too blind to fully grasp. As the knowledge of how to channel that energy flows through him, the gathering array and his own innate tenacity finally clicking into a singular, lethal purpose. And his amber eyes snap open, glowing with a terrifying, otherworldly intensity that signals the birth of a predator far more dangerous than any demon. While he reaches out with a hand wreathed in crackling, golden cosmic energy, his fingers closing around the broken remains of his axe with a grip that could crush stone. And he turns his gaze toward the cowering imp, his voice a low, dangerous growl that promises a swift and brutal end to the creature's pathetic existence. The imp unleashes a barrage of soul-scorching violet projectiles, filling the air with a chaotic, magical storm that threatens to incinerate everything in its path. And Zack moves with the desperate, fluid grace of a man who has danced with death for 30 days, his body crackling with raw, golden cosmic energy as he parries the lethal assault. While he weaves through the magical onslaught, his movements a blur of lethal intent as he closes the distance between himself and the cackling, winged demon. And the air itself seems to buckle under the pressure of their collision, a massive, reality-bending explosion of light and sound that tears through the quiet forest canopy. As the dust begins to settle on the final day of his grueling, month-long tutorial, revealing the scarred and silent clearing where he has fought for every inch of his survival. While the remnants of his enemies drift in the nearby stream, their broken forms a testament to the brutal, unforgiving nature of a world that demands only the strongest to endure. And Zack sits amidst the wreckage, his hands calloused and bandaged as he meticulously scrapes his weapon, preparing his tools for the next inevitable blood-soaked encounter. While he holds his makeshift spear toward the sky, his amber eyes reflecting the harsh, unforgiving sun as he confirms that his gear is ready for the hunt. And he reflects on the crushing weight of his goals, knowing that while he would have preferred to reach level 25 before facing such horrors, the system's timeline is absolute. So he grips his axe with a final, ironclad resolve, acknowledging that even if his plans have been derailed, he refuses to slow down for a single fatal second. Zack stands in the quiet aftermath of his latest victory, his amber eyes glinting with a cold, calculated hunger as he acknowledges that the system rewards those who embrace the risk. And with a smirk that cuts through the exhaustion, he decides that one herald is simply not enough to satisfy his growing need for power. While he declares his intent to hunt down another, his posture radiating the lethal confidence of a man who has finally stopped running and started dominating. Miles away, the demon General Agras stands in his dim, opulent office, his expression a mix of boredom and dark anticipation as he reflects on the chaos of the past month. And he turns to his subordinate Rydell, his voice dripping with a mocking, tipsy charm as he asks if the long, grueling wait has finally taken its toll. While Rydell stands rigid and unyielding, his stern face betraying nothing as he offers a curt, professional confirmation that the time for patience has reached its end. And Agras stares into the shadows, his eyes burning with a sinister light as he notes that this is merely the prologue to the carnage they are about to unleash. While he explains that once the portal is complete and they cross the threshold, they will be severed from the clan, leaving them to carve their own bloody legacy in the new world. And the scene shifts to a massive, reality-tearing portal crackling with violet energy, a gateway that looms over a vast, waiting army of demons ready to descend upon the forest. As Agras watches the gathering horde with a feral, toothy grin, his excitement peaking because he knows the true, violent work of the incursion is finally about to begin. The massive, shadow-wreathed form of Vul looms over the battlefield, a level 45 Herald-level nightmare that radiates an aura of pure, suffocating malice. While Zack stands his ground, his muscles coiled and his axe gripped with a white-knuckled intensity that betrays his lethal, unwavering focus. And he recalls the tranquil, sun-drenched memory of fishing with his father, a stark contrast to the blood-soaked reality he now inhabits, where his father's voice echoes in his mind, explaining that every creature in the wild possesses a unique, defining trait that makes it a master of its domain. As the memory shifts to the rhythmic, gentle tug of a fishing line, the elder man's wisdom cutting through the tension of the present moment, while he muses on the inherent, slippery nature of fish and the simple, brutal truth that strength alone is never enough to conquer the unknown. And he emphasizes that humanity's true edge has always been the ability to outthink the predator, to craft tools and traps that bridge the gap between prey and hunter. As the scene snaps back to the present, Zack's hands working with frantic, calculated precision to set his deadly, hidden snare. And he grins with a feral, dangerous confidence, acknowledging that while he lacks the raw, overwhelming power of a herald, he is armed with something far more lethal. As he stands amidst the foliage, his trap primed and ready to turn the tide, proving that he is the one who truly dictates the terms of this hunt. Zack stares down the hulking, shadow-wreathed form of Vul, his mind racing with the grim realization that raw physical power will not be enough to survive this encounter. And he knows that the gap between his own strength and the herald's overwhelming malice is simply too vast to bridge with brute force alone. While he calculates the lethal stakes of the fight, fully aware that a single, solid hit from the beast would mean his immediate and permanent end. So he commits to a strategy of absolute evasion, deciding that the only way to stay alive is to ensure that the monster never lands a single blow. And he focuses his intent, channeling his limited cosmic energy into his limbs to push his speed and reflexes beyond the limits of a normal human. While he feels the golden, crackling energy surge through his muscles, reinforcing his frame and hardening his body to withstand the immense strain of the coming battle. And he shouts into the void, his voice a desperate, defiant challenge as he begins to sprint through the dense forest, baiting the herald into his trap. Because he understands that he is not a natural cultivator, and with his finite reserves of cosmic energy, he cannot afford to waste a single drop on useless movement. And as the beast crashes through the trees behind him, splintering the ancient wood with terrifying ease, Zack knows that every step must be perfect because there is no room for error. So he grits his teeth, his amber eyes burning with a cold, predatory resolve as he prepares to execute the final, desperate phase of his plan. A blinding surge of golden cosmic energy erupts from the ground, a violent manifestation of power that forces the very air to crackle with raw, untamed potential. And Zack lunges forward with the ferocity of a cornered beast, his axe glowing with that same celestial light as he prepares to shatter the herald's defenses. While he brings the weapon down in a thunderous arc, the impact tearing through the monster's hide and sending shockwaves of force rippling across the clearing. And the scene shifts to the dark, oppressive atmosphere of the demon estate, where a massive portal hums with a sinister, violet energy that threatens to consume the horizon. While Agras stands before his gathered forces, his gaze sharp and demanding as he questions the whereabouts of his subordinate, his patience wearing thin in the face of such incompetence. And a soldier steps forward to deliver the news, confirming that the officer has already crossed the threshold into the incursion portal, leaving the general behind. While Agras sneers at the report, his expression twisting into a mask of cold, calculated loathing as he acknowledges the audacity of his own subordinate. And he turns his attention back to the armored ranks, his voice cutting through the silence as he declares that they will not be following that path. While a dark, predatory grin spreads across his face, his eyes burning with the secret, twisted ambition of a man who has finally decided to rewrite the rules of his clan. And back in the wild, Zack collapses into the dirt, his body battered and bleeding, yet his eyes remain locked on the horizon with the unyielding, desperate grit of a survivor. Zack stares at the glowing, iridescent pendant around his neck, the realization hitting him like a physical blow that he is pushing his own limits far too hard. And he watches as the cosmic energy courses through his veins, his body beginning to fray under the immense, unnatural strain of the power he is desperately trying to harness. But even as his physical form threatens to tear apart at the seams, he refuses to yield, his eyes locking onto the monstrous beast charging toward him with lethal intent. And he forces his battered legs to keep moving, sprinting toward the hidden, spiked trap he has painstakingly prepared as his only hope for survival. while the heavy, rhythmic thumping of the monster's paws echoes behind him, a terrifying reminder that the predator is closing the distance with every passing second. And he suddenly halts his frantic flight, his body twisting with a violent, explosive burst of speed as he pivots to face his pursuer head-on. While the beast leaps into the air, its massive, armored form a blur of crimson and shadow as it prepares to descend upon him with crushing, predatory force. And Zack watches with a grim, focused intensity as his thrown axe finds its mark, burying itself deep into the monster's skull with a sickening, final thud. While he drops to one knee, his chest heaving and his body slick with sweat and blood, his mind racing as he wonders if his desperate gamble has finally paid off. And the forest erupts in a spray of leaves and debris as the beast crashes into the hidden, razor-sharp spikes, the trap successfully skewering the monster in a brutal, decisive end. The air crackles with pure, unadulterated power as the system floods Zack's vision with the long-awaited notifications, confirming he has finally shattered his limits and hit level 25. And he stands amidst the swirling golden energy, his chest heaving as he stares at the glowing interface, the weight of his struggle finally giving way to a surge of triumph. Because he has clawed his way through hell to reach this milestone, and as the realization washes over him, he lets out a raw, cathartic roar of victory that echoes through the trees. And he thrusts a finger toward the heavens, daring the system to throw anything else his way, his face twisted in a feral, defiant grin that proves he is far from finished. But the adrenaline of the moment is cut short by a sudden, chilling shift in the atmosphere, a dark, oppressive pressure that makes his skin crawl and his instincts scream in alarm. And he snaps his head toward the encroaching darkness, his eyes narrowing as he senses the presence of something truly malevolent lurking just beyond the tree line. While miles away, the cold, violet spires of the Demon Clan estate pierce the sky, a monument to the ruthless, blood-soaked hierarchy that Agras is forced to navigate. And inside those walls, a terrified, pathetic demon soldier pleads for his life, his voice trembling as he stares up at the cold, unyielding blade of his superior. Because in this world, incompetence is a death sentence, and Agras doesn't hesitate for a single heartbeat before he brings his sword down in a swift, brutal arc. And with a sickening, final sound, the soldier's head is severed from his shoulders, leaving Agras to stand in the silence, his expression as cold and detached as the void itself. Names drives his spear through the fallen soldier, his frustration boiling over as he demands to know how much longer they must endure these humiliating, deceptive disguises. And Agras looms in the shadows, his expression cold and unyielding as he shuts down the descent, reminding his subordinate that the charade ends only when he commands it. While the dying demon gasps on the floor, his life force fading as he struggles to comprehend the sheer, ruthless betrayal unfolding before his very eyes. And Aaliyah steps into the light, her gaze sharp and mocking as she questions if she too is just another expendable pawn in his grand, twisted design. But Agras turns to her with a chilling, predatory focus, confirming that she is indeed a target, for he refuses to let anyone on the new world know of her involvement. And he continues his purge, his magical chains tightening around the throat of another dissenter, silencing the final, desperate protests of those who dare to question his authority. While the victim collapses to the ground, his body limp and broken as the reality of being completely cut off from their clan's protection finally sets in. And Agras watches the carnage with a detached, aristocratic indifference, coldly acknowledging the fallen Ilver as the price for his own freedom. While he declares his absolute disgust for the wretched, backstabbing nature of his own kin, convinced that the new world will be far safer than the viper's nest he is leaving behind. And he stares into the dark with a feral, burning intensity, his mind already racing toward the final steps of his plan as he prepares to sever his ties to the past forever. The massive, reality-tearing portal crackles with violet energy, a gateway that looms over the waiting army of demons as they prepare for their final, brutal descent. And in the forest, Zack is caught in a whirlwind of motion, his body a blur of desperate survival as he dodges the snapping jaws of the Gwilgi horde. While he gasps for air, his face etched with the exhaustion of a man who has been pushed to his absolute breaking point by the relentless, swarming predators. And he curses the system's silence, his mind reeling from the realization that his victory over the Herald was nothing more than a trigger for this nightmare. As he feels the last of his cosmic energy flickering out, his legs burning with the strain of trying to outrun a pack that refuses to give up the hunt. And he narrowly avoids a lethal strike, his blade flashing with a final, desperate spark of power as he parries the crushing weight of the demon's assault. While he delivers a savage, bone-shattering blow that sends the beast reeling, the sound of the impact echoing through the trees like a thunderclap of defiance. And he lands in a low, tactical crouch, his eyes scanning the encroaching shadows as he realizes he is completely surrounded by the bloodthirsty, snarling pack. While he notices a faint, golden hum of energy returning to his fingertips, a tiny, precious reward for his kill that offers a glimmer of hope in the dark. and he grins with a feral, dangerous intensity, realizing that if he can just keep the slaughter going, he might actually carve his way out of this hell. Zack stares down the encroaching swarm with a feral, blood-spattered grin, his mind locking onto the only truth that matters in this hellish dimension. And he lunges into the fray with a deafening roar, his axe carving a lethal arc through the air as he cleaves the lead Gwilgi in two. While he dances through the snapping jaws and razor-sharp claws, his movements fueled by the singular, obsessive need to slaughter every beast in his path. And miles away, the Demon Clan estate trembles under the weight of a massive crimson pillar of energy that tears a hole in the very fabric of reality. While Kevoran stands over a table of maps, his cold, calculating gaze sweeping over his subordinates as he asserts his absolute authority in the general's absence. And he points a gloved finger at the tactical charts, demanding that his scouts uncover the truth behind the mysterious death of Harold Urquhart. While a loyal soldier bows his head, confirming that the orders have been executed with the ruthless efficiency expected of the clan's elite. And Kevoran leans over the table, his white hair cascading over his armor as he pushes for an immediate upgrade to their forward outpost. But the tension in the room shatters as a sudden, reality-warping tremor signals that something is forcing its way through the unstable violet portal. And all eyes turn toward the threshold, where a single, sharp-edged blade emerges from the shadows, signaling the arrival of a dangerous new player. The portal stabilizes with a violent, reality-warping tremor, and from the swirling violet abyss, a vanguard of elite demon warriors steps forward, their armor gleaming with a cold, predatory light. While back in the forest, a battered and blood-soaked Zack drags his weary body through the undergrowth, his every movement a testament to the sheer, stubborn grit of a survivor who refuses to quit. And he pauses, his amber eyes clouded with pain and exhaustion as he whispers to himself, his mind fixated on the singular, driving necessity of finding a safe place to rest. Because he knows that if he doesn't reach one of his hidden supply caches soon, the relentless pursuit of the Gwilgi horde will finally catch up to him and end his journey for good. So he pushes through the agony, his legs trembling as he spots the familiar, ancient tree that marks his secret sanctuary, his heart hammering against his ribs with a desperate, frantic hope. And he reaches out with a shaking, bandaged hand, gripping the rough bark as he begins the grueling, painful climb, his muscles screaming in protest with every inch he gains, until he finally collapses onto the thick, sturdy branch of his hidden cache, his body limp and broken as the silence of the forest finally offers him a moment of respite. While he closes his eyes, his breathing ragged and shallow as he drifts into a brief, uneasy slumber, his mind still haunted by the shadows of the monsters he has fought. And the morning sun filters through the dense canopy, casting a soft, golden light over his resting form as the birds begin to chirp, signaling the start of another brutal day. While he stirs from his sleep, his eyes snapping open as he realizes that over a month has passed since he was first thrown into this hellish, unforgiving dimension. Zack rests in the high branches of his sanctuary, his body battered and scarred, yet he stares into the canopy with a grim, cynical realization that the world he knew is long gone. And he scoffs at his own fleeting optimism, acknowledging that the life he once lived ended a full month ago, replaced by this relentless, blood-soaked struggle for survival. While he marvels at the sheer, unnatural speed of his own recovery, noting that even though his wounds are knitting together, he is still far from his peak physical condition. And he prepares himself for the grueling trek back to his base, knowing that the path ahead is long and treacherous, but it is the only way to finally select his class. As he drops from the tree and begins his journey, his eyes suddenly widen in a flash of pure adrenaline-fueled alarm, his instincts screaming that he is no longer alone. And he freezes in the brush, his heart hammering against his ribs as he spots a tall, armored figure stalking through the forest with the cold, predatory grace of a hunter. While he watches from the shadows, his face contorting into a mask of disbelief and mounting dread as he realizes he is being tracked by a lethal, otherworldly entity. And he stares in horror as the figure comes into view, confirming his worst fears as he identifies the intruder as a high-ranking, armored demon scout. While the demon kneels in the dirt, his sharp, red eyes scanning the ground as he examines a drop of blood, his voice echoing with a chilling, guttural command. And Zack holds his breath, his muscles coiled and ready to explode into violence, as the demon invokes the name of Agras, signaling that the hunt has truly begun. Zack descends like a vengeful storm, his heavy poleaxe arcing through the air to deliver a crushing, decisive blow against the unsuspecting demon scout. And with the target neutralized and pinned to the forest floor, he claims his hard-won prize, his voice cold and devoid of any mercy. As he hauls the bound captive over his shoulder, marching through the dense, unforgiving wilderness with the grim determination of a man who has finally turned the tables. And he dumps the struggling demon onto the dirt, the creature restrained by thick, coarse ropes that bite into its armor as it sits in the dark. But Zack isn't interested in a polite conversation, so he douses the captive with a splash of water, forcing a sudden, jarring gasp from the demon's lungs. And the scout frantically calls out for his comrade, his eyes wide with panic as he realizes his partner is nowhere to be found in the oppressive silence. While he tries to stammer out a name, his voice cracking under the weight of his terror as he stares up at the looming, lethal silhouette of his captor. And Zack looms over him, the sharp, polished edge of his poleaxe resting against the demon's throat as he offers a chilling, singular greeting that freezes the blood. While he demands to know the scale of the invasion, his amber eyes burning with a predatory intensity that promises agony if the demon refuses to speak. And the system interface flares to life, identifying the captive as Azan of Clan Azrazak, leaving the scout trembling as he realizes his secrets are about to be ripped away. Zack's patience snaps as he demands answers, his blade whistling through the air to deliver a brutal, silencing strike against the defiant demon scout. And the air turns volatile as the captive demon, cornered and desperate, begins to channel a massive, unstable surge of cosmic energy into his own core. While the demon's eyes burn with a final, hateful command, his body glowing with the terrifying, soul-scorching heat of an imminent, self-inflicted detonation. And suddenly, the forest is consumed by a blinding, reality-shattering explosion that sends shockwaves tearing through the earth, throwing Zack backward into the dirt. As the dust settles on the scorched, cratered landscape, Zack drags himself up from the wreckage, his mind reeling from the sheer, suicidal fanaticism of his prey. And he stares at the smoldering remains, his frustration mounting as he realizes the demon chose to vaporize himself rather than surrender a single scrap of intel. While he surveys the empty, silent clearing, his eyes scanning the perimeter for any sign of reinforcements drawn by the massive, violet-hued blast. And he stands amidst the ruins of the ambush, his expression hardening as he laments the loss of potential gear that was incinerated in the demon's final, spiteful act. While he grips his salvaged hand axe with a grim, ironclad resolve, acknowledging that while the interrogation was a total failure, at least he walked away with a new weapon. And he prepares to move on, his gaze fixed on the horizon as he accepts that his old, battered gear is finally being replaced by the spoils of his brutal, blood-soaked hunt. Zack reflects on the monumental milestone of finally hitting level 25, a hard-earned victory that marks his transition from a desperate survivor to a true contender. But he knows that choosing his class is a decision that will define his entire future, and he refuses to rush into it without securing his position first. So he turns his attention to the F-grade small-scale illusion array, his finger tapping the interface to initiate the deployment of his new critical defensive measure. And with a heavy thud, the containment unit materializes on the forest floor, pulsating with a vibrant, ethereal energy that signals the start of the installation process. While he kneels to inspect the contents, noting the strange, crackling rods that differ from his previous gear and realizing he must manually anchor them around his camp. And he moves with practiced, rhythmic efficiency, driving the final energized rod into the earth to complete the perimeter of his hidden, fortified sanctuary. So he stands back to witness the result, watching as the system confirms the activation of the array and the immediate, reality-bending shift in his surroundings. While a massive, shimmering violet dome erupts into existence, cloaking his entire campsite in a layer of absolute, impenetrable visual deception that defies the natural world. And he reaches out to touch the crackling barrier, marveling at the sheer effectiveness of the tech as he realizes his camp has effectively vanished from existence. So he grins with a cold, predatory confidence, knowing that while his enemies are growing smarter and more dangerous, he has finally bought himself the time to strike back. Zack stands amidst the quiet forest, his amber eyes burning with a fierce, predatory intensity as he finally acknowledges that the time for hesitation has passed. And he stares at the glowing system prompt that confirms his long-awaited milestone, the requirement to reach level 25 finally marked as complete. While he taps the interface with a smirk of pure, unadulterated confidence, ready to claim the power he has bled and suffered to earn. But the system immediately throws a wrench in his plans, flashing a harsh red error that demands a staggering 6,000 Nexus coins for a required node. And he curses the greedy, manipulative nature of the system, his blood boiling as he realizes his hard-earned savings from the Herald kill are about to be drained. While he begrudgingly accepts the extortion, his finger hovering over the confirmation button as he prays this won't broadcast his position to every demon in the woods. And with a sudden thunderous thud, a shimmering crystalline structure manifests on the forest floor, pulsating with an ethereal, multicolored light that defies the darkness. While he leans in to inspect the mysterious device, his brow furrowing as he wonders if this is a new home base or a gateway to deeper system secrets. And he squints at the interface as it flickers to life, the text revealing that he now has 5 distinct class choices waiting for his selection. While a feral, triumphant grin spreads across his face, his eyes locking onto the potential for greatness as he whispers that the wait is finally over. The system displays the fighter class, a basic F-grade option for a fledgling combatant that offers solid melee proficiency but lacks the specialized edge he craves. And next appears the acolyte, an F-grade path for those looking to wield the elements, though Zack knows his own path lies in physical dominance rather than magic. While the Marine class floats into view, an uncommon F-grade specialization that focuses on naval combat, a useless prospect for a man currently stranded in a deep forest. And then the Demon Hunter manifests, an uncommon class designed specifically for the eradication of demonic entities, boasting high power but a dangerously narrow focus. While the Hatchetman class appears as a rare F-grade option, perfectly aligning with his current arsenal and his grim, lumberjack-like role in this endless, monster-filled wilderness. And Zack studies the glowing projections with a critical eye, his mind weighing the pros and cons of each path as he realizes the gravity of this choice. While he notes that every option is upgradable, meaning he isn't necessarily locked into a weak tier forever, provided he survives long enough to evolve his potential. And he immediately discards the fighter and acolyte paths, convinced that settling for a common class when rarer options are on the table would be a tactical failure. While he pauses to consider the Demon Hunter, acknowledging its raw strength against his current foes, but fearing that such a specialized build will become a liability later. And he grimaces at the thought of being pigeonholed into a single enemy type, his pragmatic nature driving him to seek a more versatile and sustainable path forward. Zack realizes that survival in this brutal dimension requires more than just demon slaying, as he dodges a monstrous, insectoid predator with frantic, chibi-style desperation. And he dismisses the Marine class with a sharp, decisive wave, knowing that being stranded on a tiny island is a tactical nightmare he has no interest in repeating. While he stands in the quiet, shadowed forest, his expression hardening as he rejects the idea of being shackled to naval warfare, leaving him with only one viable path. And he gazes out over the landscape with a look of grim, calculated ambition, fully aware that the system only rewards those who are brave enough to seize their own destiny. As he ponders the potential drawbacks of his chosen path, wondering if the restriction to axe-based combat will hinder his growth, only to dismiss the concern with a cold, confident smirk, because he realizes that such a specialization is actually a massive advantage, a way to sharpen his lethality until he becomes a force of nature that no enemy can withstand. And he reaches out to grasp the shimmering, iridescent crystal of the Nexus node, his hands trembling with the raw, crackling energy of a man on the verge of total transformation. While he channels his intent into the device, the air screaming as he locks in his choice, the title of Hatchetman burning into his very soul as the system registers his selection. And the world explodes in a cascade of golden light as he is showered with prestigious titles, his stats skyrocketing as he becomes the first person on the planet to claim a class. While he collapses to his knees, his body surging with newfound power as the system floods his mind with notifications, confirming that his evolution from prey to predator is finally complete. Zack stares into the void with a smirk of pure, unadulterated triumph, his amber eyes burning with the realization that he has officially become the first human to claim a class. And the system interface floods his vision with the cold, hard data of his new reality, displaying his level 25 status and the prestigious hard-earned titles that define his path. While he marvels at the massive, permanent stat boosts that have surged through his body, his muscles rippling with the newfound strength that has turned him into a walking weapon. And he flexes his arm, the bandages straining against the raw, crackling energy that now hums beneath his skin, a physical manifestation of his evolution into a true defier. While he scans the fine print of his Hatchetman class, his brow furrowing as he realizes that his most powerful skills are locked behind grueling, blood-soaked quest requirements. And he scoffs at the unfair, demanding nature of the system, acknowledging that in this unforgiving world, nothing is ever given and everything must be seized through sheer, relentless effort. While he grips the handle of his axe with a white-knuckled intensity, his posture radiating the lethal, predatory confidence of a man who has finally stopped running from his fate. And he stands amidst the crackling golden aura of his power, his silhouette a dark, imposing omen as he declares that he is ready to hunt the invaders. While the scene shifts to the distant, opulent halls of the demon estate, where a high-ranking noble lounges in his throne, sipping wine while mocking the incompetence of his peers. And he sneers at the tactical blunder of sending mere beasts through the portal, unaware that a new, human apex predator is waiting on the other side to tear them apart. Zack dismisses the threat of the island with a cynical scoff, his axe biting deep into the wood as he labels the previous demonic skirmishes a cowardly move. And he stands amidst the splintered logs, his bare, muscular torso glistening with sweat as he muses that there is nothing truly dangerous left on this island. While he theorizes that the high-level threats like Vul and Urkhaz likely just tore each other apart the moment they stepped foot into this dimension. And far away in the cosmic expanse, a high-ranking demon officer laments the general's brilliant but time-wasting tactics that have squandered a month of preparation. While he stares at the glowing, vibrant planet below, bitter that they have missed the window to properly mobilize against the other, more pressing incursions. And he turns his attention to the ritual site, where thousands of slaves are being sacrificed in a blinding, crimson pillar of energy to appease the ruthless heavens. While the demon scout leader watches the spectacle with a predatory smirk, his glowing blue eyes reflecting the dark ambition of a man who feels truly blessed. And he looks out over the rugged mountain range, revealing that his scouts have already uncovered a massive, hidden vein of Nexus crystals deep within the earth. While he gazes at the shimmering, priceless hoard, knowing that this staggering wealth is enough to eclipse the fortunes of even the most ancient clan elders. And he grins with a sharp, treacherous glint in his eyes, deciding that as the master of scouts, he has no intention of letting this treasure reach the clan. Kevoran snaps his fingers with a crackling surge of energy, barking orders at his subordinates to stop their aimless wandering and finally establish a proper base of operations. And he turns to Kayla, gesturing toward the scenic overlook as he demands to know if the spot meets her standards for their temporary encampment. While Gormer scurries to fulfill the request, meticulously arranging the table and chairs with a subservient haste that highlights his role as the group's dedicated servant. And Kevoran gestures for Kayla to take her seat, his tone shifting from a sharp commander to a surprisingly casual host as he insists she drop the formalities. While Kayla sits down with a lingering sense of unease, openly questioning how a high-ranking demon like Kevoran has the leisure to indulge in such trivialities during an active incursion. And Kevoran merely chuckles, swirling his glass with a dismissive air as he declares that he always prioritizes the things that truly satisfy his refined, aristocratic tastes. But his mood sours instantly when a common housefly lands on his dessert, his face twisting into a mask of pure, unadulterated disgust at the sight of the buzzing pest. And he bellows for Gormer to handle the nuisance, his patience evaporating as he complains that the tiny creature is on the verge of ruining his hard-earned meal. While he stares into the distance with a growing, sharp-edged irritation, calling out for his subordinate again when the expected response fails to materialize in the quiet air. And the scene erupts into sudden, heart-stopping tension as Kayla lunges forward with her bow drawn, her eyes wide with shock as she realizes that something has silenced their comrade. Zack drives his poleaxe home with a savage, bone-crushing impact, the force of his strike leaving his opponent broken and bleeding on the cold, unforgiving forest floor. And suddenly, the air vibrates with a hostile presence as a pair of demonic scouts emerge from the tree line, their eyes locking onto the human with predatory, murderous intent. While Zack reacts with the lightning-fast reflexes of a seasoned killer, his body coiling and snapping like a whip as he prepares to meet the incoming threat head-on. And the ground shudders as a spear strikes the earth with a violent, piercing crack, a warning shot that signals the start of a desperate, high-stakes skirmish. While the lead demon descends from the sky like a falling star, his massive blade raised high to deliver a crushing, lethal blow that threatens to end Zack's run. And the two forces collide in a blinding, earth-shaking explosion of sparks and raw energy, the sheer power of the impact sending shockwaves rippling through the dense, ancient trees. While the demon presses his advantage, his blade grinding against Zack's weapon in a shower of sparks as he sneers at the human, relishing the prospect of a new, challenging hunt. And the demon's grin widens into a twisted, predatory mask of malice, his confidence peaking as he dismisses the human as nothing more than another pest to be eradicated. While Zack grunts under the immense, crushing weight of the assault, his muscles straining and his teeth bared in a silent, defiant promise of total, bloody retribution. And he pushes back with everything he has, his roar of exertion echoing through the clearing as he prepares to turn the tide against his arrogant, otherworldly foes. The demon warrior swings his massive greatsword in a lethal downward arc, forcing Zack to weave through the air with desperate, high-speed agility. And the blade slams into the earth with a deafening crack, shattering the ground and sending jagged shards of stone flying in every direction. While Zack lands with a heavy thud, his eyes locked onto his opponent as he prepares to counter the demon's overwhelming, brute force assault. And the demon's face contorts into a mask of pure, unadulterated shock, his blue eyes widening as he realizes his killing blow has completely missed its mark. While Zack grips his poleaxe with white-knuckled intensity, his muscles coiling like a spring as he prepares to unleash a devastating, retaliatory strike. And he lunges forward with a feral, predatory grace, his weapon blurring through the air as he aims to exploit the opening in the demon's defenses. While a sudden, sharp pain flares in his shoulder as an arrow finds its mark, forcing a grunt of agony from his lips as he stumbles under the impact. And the demon recovers his composure, his expression twisting into a sneer of cold, murderous intent as he prepares to finish the job with a final, crushing blow. While Zack grits his teeth against the searing pain, his eyes burning with a defiant, ironclad resolve as he raises his poleaxe to meet the incoming steel. And the two weapons collide in a blinding flash of sparks and raw energy, the sheer force of the block threatening to buckle Zack's knees as he holds his ground against the onslaught. The unnamed demon warrior locks blades with Zack, his eyes widening in genuine disbelief as he struggles to comprehend how a human from such a fresh, low-level world could possibly match his strength. And the demon's confusion turns to shock when Zack exploits the opening, his bandaged hand snapping out to deliver a crushing, disorienting blow directly to the demon's face. While the momentum shifts in a heartbeat, Zack's poleaxe flashing through the air with lethal intent as he forces the stunned warrior to retreat and recalibrate his approach. And the demon barely manages to deflect the follow-up strike, the force of the collision sending a shockwave through the clearing that leaves the air humming with residual energy. While Zack, his face marked by the grit of 1,000 battles, narrows his eyes and prepares to capitalize on the demon's momentary lapse in confidence. And he launches himself forward with a sudden, explosive leap, closing the distance between them before the warrior can even recover his footing. While the demon stands his ground, his posture rigid and his expression hardening as he tracks the human's movements with a newfound, dangerous level of focus. And in the background, another wounded scout watches the exchange with a pained grunt, realizing that the human's resilience is far beyond anything they were prepared to face. While the unnamed demon warrior stands tall, his dark aura flaring as he acknowledges the human's prowess, his voice dripping with a mix of grudging respect and predatory malice. And his glowing blue eyes burn with a chilling, ancient recognition, confirming that he has finally identified the true, terrifying nature of the defier standing before him. The rejects and the trash are cast aside, falling into the abyss as the system deems them too weak to even cultivate. Yet amidst the darkness and the rain, Zack persists, his spirit refusing to be extinguished by the cold, indifferent judgment of the heavens. And he fights with such raw, unyielding ferocity that the very heavens are forced to acknowledge his existence. While the system identifies him for what he truly is, a defier, a rare anomaly capable of shattering the mortal limits that bind everyone else. And Zack stands tall, his body battered but his gaze burning with a lethal, predatory focus that promises nothing but destruction for his enemies. While the demon warrior eyes the human's potential with a mix of arrogance and twisted admiration, his blade humming with dark, suffocating energy. And he sneers that it is almost a shame that such a promising specimen has chosen to defy him, his voice dripping with aristocratic malice. While the demon lunges forward in a blur of crimson shadow, his strike whistling through the air with enough force to cleave a mountain in two. And Zack reacts with a desperate, split-second dodge, his muscles screaming as he narrowly avoids the lethal arc of the demon's blade. While he counters with a brutal, point-blank strike that lands square on the demon's chest, only for the warrior to stand unmoved, mocking the human's effort because he hasn't even left a scratch. Zack skids across the dirt, his eyes narrowing as he realizes the demon's armor possesses some kind of annoying, reality-bending property that just deflected his killing blow. And he watches with growing frustration as the demon warrior channels a surge of crimson energy, preparing to unleash a counterattack that could end his run. While the demon swings his massive blade with terrifying speed, the weapon shattering the ground where Zack stood only a split second before. And the demon's face contorts into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage, his eyes burning with the realization that this human is far more resilient than he anticipated. While the shockwave of the impact throws debris into the air, forcing the demon to stumble as he struggles to maintain his footing amidst the chaos. And the demon's expression shifts to one of genuine, panicked confusion, his mind reeling as he tries to process how a mere human is still standing. While Zack seizes the opening, his muscles coiling as he prepares to launch himself back into the fray with a lethal, calculated strike. And the forest erupts in a blinding flash of power as Zack's poleaxe tears through the air, forcing the demon to scramble backward to avoid being cleaved in two. While a panicked subordinate screams out to Keveron for assistance, his voice trembling as the reality of their tactical failure begins to sink in. And Keveron looms in the background, his cold, aristocratic gaze fixed on the battlefield as he barks a sharp, cutting reprimand at his subordinate for losing control. Zack descends like a falling hammer, his poleaxe singing through the air as he aims to cleave the demon warrior in two. But the demon reacts with terrifying speed, his massive blade meeting Zack's strike in a blinding, earth-shattering collision that sends shockwaves tearing through the forest floor. And the impact is so violent that the ground beneath them fractures, yet Zack refuses to yield, his roar of defiance echoing as he presses the assault. While the demon warrior, his face a mask of cold, predatory malice, manages to pin Zack down, his hand clamping over the human's face with a crushing, suffocating grip. And the demon grunts in pain, his own eye socket a ruined, bleeding mess from Zack's earlier strike, yet he ignores the agony to focus entirely on the kill. While he screams for Kayla to finish the job, his voice raw with the desperate, bloodthirsty need to see the human finally broken. And in the chaos, the demon draws a hidden, jagged blade, his movements fluid and practiced as he prepares to deliver a final, fatal blow. While he drives the steel deep into Zack's abdomen with a sickening, wet thud, the blade twisting to ensure maximum damage as he pins the defier to the earth. And the demon laughs, his ruined eye weeping dark ichor as he mocks the human's struggle, reveling in the sight of his prey finally losing his fight. While he looms over the gasping, impaled Zack, his aura flaring with dark, suffocating energy as he demands to know if this pathetic display is truly the extent of the defier's power. Zack's hand slams into the dirt, his fingers white-knuckled as he grips his poleaxe with a desperate, ironclad resolve that refuses to let the weapon slip away. And the demon warrior looms over him, his face a twisted mask of arrogance as he sneers down at the human, dismissing him as nothing more than a pathetic gnat. But the tide of the battle shifts in a heartbeat as a sudden, reality-warping notification flashes before Zack's eyes, signaling that he has finally achieved a critical level up. And the surge of power forces a sharp, ragged gasp from his lungs, his body trembling as he struggles to maintain his footing while pinned beneath the demon's weight. While he grunts in agony, his muscles screaming in protest as he fights to stay conscious despite the mounting, overwhelming pressure of the fight. And Kayla steps into the frame, her bow drawn with lethal precision as she commands the human to freeze, her eyes cold and devoid of any mercy. While she tracks his every movement from the shadows, her arrow notched and ready to pierce his heart if he dares to make a single foolish mistake. And Zack is struck by a sudden, jarring impact as a projectile finds its mark, forcing a pained cry from his lips as he stumbles back. While Kayla maintains her cold, unwavering focus, her voice dripping with malice as she warns him that he will not escape the consequences of his defiance. And Zack stands tall despite the blade still buried deep in his abdomen, his gaze burning with a defiant, predatory fire as he promises that the hunt is far from over. Zack stands over the cooling remains of the demon scout, his body battered and his breathing ragged as he surveys the aftermath of the brutal, short-lived skirmish. And he kneels down, his hands trembling with exhaustion as he begins to scavenge the fallen foe, desperate to find anything that might give him an edge in this nightmare. While he pulls a strange, ornate pouch from the demon's gear, the weight of it catching him off guard as he realizes it's far heavier than any simple satchel should be. And he pries the drawstring open, his amber eyes widening in disbelief as a cascade of shimmering, ethereal light spills out into the dim forest air. While he stares at the contents in utter shock, watching as a bizarre collection of mundane picnic supplies, wine, and fine tableware floats before him in a display of pure aristocratic absurdity. And he scoffs at the sheer ridiculousness of it all, wondering if these demons are actually here to conquer the world or just to host a high-class garden party. While his gaze shifts to the glowing, jagged shards mixed in with the junk, the unmistakable hum of raw power vibrating through his fingertips as he touches the strange, crystalline objects. And the system interface flares to life, identifying the treasures as F-grade Nexus crystals, vital conduits of cosmic energy that are essential for his growth and recovery. While he holds one of the crystals up to the fading light, marveling at the intense, sun-like radiance that promises to fuel his evolution and push him past his current limits. And he turns his attention to his active quest log, his mind sharpening with a cold, predatory focus as he realizes that the path to true power is finally laid out before him. Zack holds the shimmering F-grade Nexus crystal in his palm, feeling its raw energy hum against his skin as he acknowledges that even these low-tier shards are vital for his growth. And half an hour later, he is busy stripping the defeated demon of its armor, his hands moving with the cold, practiced efficiency of a scavenger who knows exactly what he needs. While he secures a small, ornate pouch to his belt, the weight of the loot clinking against his side as he prepares to leave the scene of his latest victory behind. And he flashes a sharp, predatory grin, his eyes glinting with satisfaction as he mutters his gratitude for the unexpected upgrade to his combat gear. While he holds the demon's massive greatsword up to the light, his expression shifting to one of dismissive annoyance as he realizes the weapon is far too cumbersome for his specific style. And he tosses the blade aside without a second thought, declaring that he would rather see it destroyed than let any of the demon's allies get their hands on it. While he turns his back on the carnage, his focus shifting to the glowing blue system interface that hangs in the air, signaling that it is time to review his progress. And he studies the quest log with a critical eye, his brow furrowing as he notes the frustrating lack of movement on his long-term goals despite his relentless, month-long struggle. While he scrolls through his skill requirements, his frustration boiling over as he questions the arbitrary nature of the system's milestones and the sheer, grueling distance he has left to travel. And he lets out a heavy, weary sigh, his mind racing as he calculates the remaining threats, knowing that the imps and the incursion general are still waiting for him in the dark. Zack trudges through the forest, his mind churning with the frustrating reality that the remaining heralds are ghosts in the machine, leaving him with no leads to follow. And he pushes through the dense, whispering foliage, his resolve hardening as he realizes that if he cannot hunt the heralds, he must force the game to change. So he sets his sights on the ultimate target, his amber eyes burning with a cold, calculated intensity as he fixates on the incursion general itself. And he watches the distant, violet beacon of the demon base from the shadows, a predatory smirk playing on his lips as he prepares to flip the script and initiate his own invasion.